To escape forced bonding, the Omega grabbed a stranger and learned too late he was Alpha King. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. Lily Foster had always been the quiet one, the Omega who never quite fit in. Born into a powerful family, she had never known a life free of expectations. Her world was one of duty, her every move watched, and her future already written. But Lily had never felt like she belonged in the world of power and control that surrounded her. She was different, softer, quieter, and the weight of her family's legacy pressed down on her like an invisible chain. It wasn't that she was weak. No, far from it. Lily was strong in her own way. But in a world ruled by alphas, her softness, her vulnerability, had always been seen as a liability. And so, she was never truly free. Her family had always been her anchor and her prison. From the day she was born, she had been expected to play her role, to marry for alliance, to strengthen the family name. But what Lily didn't know was that her future had already been decided, her path marked before she even had the chance to dream her own. And so, on the day of the forced bonding ceremony, Lily's fate was sealed. She had been told, in no uncertain terms, that this union would save her family. The alpha she was to bond with was powerful, his name whispered with reverence and fear. But Lily had never met him, never seen his face. All she knew was that he was an alpha, someone strong enough to secure her family's future. Yet, Lily was never given a choice. Forced into this union, Lily had no other option but to obey. Or so she thought. The ceremony was meant to be a mere formality. But as Lily stood in the grand hall, awaiting the arrival of her destined mate, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The air was thick with tension, the weight of her family's expectations pressing down on her shoulders. Her heart raced, not with excitement, but with a creeping sense of dread. As she stood there, waiting for the alpha to arrive, she caught sight of a figure moving through the shadows at the edge of the hall. His presence was commanding, but there was something different about him. He moved with a limp, his gait slow and measured, but his eyes were something else entirely. There was a sharpness in them, an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. And then, in that moment, it hit her. This was the stranger she had been told to marry. But the man before her was nothing like she had imagined. He was not the strong, confident alpha she had been promised. He was something far more mysterious. She didn't know who he was, but she could feel the pull of his presence, the magnetic force drawing her in. And so, against her better judgment, Lily reached out and grabbed his hand. The moment her fingers brushed against his skin, something unexpected happened. A shock of energy, a rush of power, and a realization that hit her like a freight train. This man, this stranger, was no ordinary alpha. He was the Alpha King. The man who had been forced into hiding, the one who had been living in the shadows, had been standing before her all along. And in that moment, everything changed. Lily had unknowingly placed herself in the center of a web of fate, a web that was now pulling her closer to a destiny she could never have imagined. She had escaped one forced bond only to fall into another, one that would bind her to the Alpha King forever. The silence that followed was suffocating. Lily stood frozen, still holding the stranger's hand, her heart racing in her chest. His grip was firm, unyielding, but there was no harshness in his touch, only an electric pulse of energy that seemed to flow between them, an undeniable force pulling them together. She had thought she was escaping her fate, but in that moment, she realized her destiny was already set. His eyes, sharp and calculating, met hers, and for the first time, Lily felt the weight of her own vulnerability. "Who are you?" she whispered her voice barely a breath against the tension that gripped the room. The stranger didn't answer immediately, his gaze lingering on her with an intensity that sent a chill through her. "I am someone you should have never met," he said at last, his voice low and gravelly. "But fate has a way of bringing people together, whether they are ready or not." Lily's mind raced, her thoughts tumbling over each other. She had to get away. She had to find a way out of this. but her body refused to move. His presence was too overwhelming, too magnetic. The crowd around them had gone silent, all eyes on the two of them, waiting for something to happen. The Alpha King's arrival had been anticipated, but not in this way, not like this. She had never seen him before, but somehow, deep inside, she knew he was the one who had been pulling at the threads of her life from the very beginning. "I didn't ask for this," Lily murmured, trying to pull her hand away, but his grip only tightened, his fingers wrapping around hers with a certainty that left no room for escape. "Neither did I," he replied softly, his eyes dark with something she couldn't quite read. "But sometimes, we don't get to choose." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, as if they were both bound by something far beyond their control. She struggled against the rush of emotions swirling inside her. Her family had promised her safety, a future that had already been mapped out for her. This stranger, this Alpha King, was nothing more than an obstacle standing in her way. Yet, why did she feel this strange pull toward him? Why did her heart beat faster with every passing second? She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "You're him, aren't you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The Alpha King." He didn't answer right away, but she saw the flicker of something, resignation, maybe, pass across his face. The man before her wasn't the strong, invincible figure she had imagined. He was more than that. He was broken, scarred, and yet, there was an undeniable strength about him, something raw and untamed. "Yes," he finally said, his voice steady but filled with an undeniable sorrow. "I am the Alpha King." Lily's mind reeled. She had been promised an alliance, a union to save her family, but this man, this stranger, was not the Alpha she had been led to believe. He was not a stranger at all. He was the very man she had been bound to by fate, the one she had been trying to escape. And now, standing before him, there was no turning back. The world she knew, the life she had once expected to lead, was slipping through her fingers like sand. "Why me?" Lily asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. "Why did you come here to me?" He looked at her for a long moment, his gaze unreadable, before he spoke. "Because you are mine," he said, the words a declaration, not a question. "And whether you accept it or not, we are bound." Lily felt a strange mix of emotions, fear, confusion, but also something deeper, something she couldn't name. She didn't want to believe it. She couldn't. But as the truth settled in, she realized that in some twisted way, this was her fate. She had been chosen, and there was nothing she could do to change it. She had escaped the forced bonding, only to be thrust into another, one that felt even more suffocating, more inevitable. And as the realization dawned, Lily's heart sank. She had been caught in the web of fate, and there was no escape. "I don't want this," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't want you." The Alpha King's expression softened, his grip on her hand loosening, but he didn't let go. "You will," he said, his voice low and sure. "In time you will." Lily wanted to argue, to fight back, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she looked at him, the man who was now her mate, her Alpha King, and realized that the battle she had been fighting was already over. Her fate had been sealed long ago, and now she had no choice but to face it. There was no running anymore. She was his, and he was hers. The night stretched on, heavy with silence as Lily sat in the dimly lit room, her mind racing. She was no longer sure what she had expected, but it certainly wasn't this. She had always dreamed of freedom, of escaping the life that had been chosen for her. But now, with the Alpha King seated before her, his presence looming like an immovable force, she realized that the chains she had fought against were nothing compared to the ones fate had bound her with. The firelight flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and Lily couldn't help but notice how the king, despite his stoic exterior, seemed just as trapped as she felt. His eyes were distant, his shoulders stiff, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of vulnerability there. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the cold mask of the ruler he was meant to be. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. This was no ordinary man. He wasn't just some alpha. He was the Alpha King, the ruler of all, and somehow, he was bound to her now. The realization sent a shiver down her spine. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, breaking the heavy silence. His gaze shifted to her, and she saw a flicker of something in his silver eyes. Regret, perhaps, or maybe just weariness. I couldn't, he replied, his voice hoarse. I didn't want you to fear me. Lily's heart pounded in her chest as she met his gaze, searching for some kind of explanation, something that made sense. You want me to trust you? She asked, her voice trembling with emotion. But you've kept everything from me. You've lied to me. The king sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. His eyes closed for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts. I didn't lie, he said quietly. I hid the truth. There's a difference. Lily's head spun as she tried to process his words. She couldn't wrap her mind around the idea of being tied to this man, this powerful, mysterious figure, who had been hidden behind a mask of weakness. So what now? She asked, her voice small but firm. What do you expect from me? The king didn't answer right away. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze softening as he looked at her, and Lily felt the weight of his gaze like a physical touch. I expect nothing, he said finally. But there is something you must understand. He stood and moved toward her, his steps slow, deliberate. You are my mate, Lily. Whether you want to accept it or not, we are bound by fate. And no matter what you think of me, we will face this together. The words hit her like a wave, crashing over her, pulling her under. She had never believed in fate, in destiny. Her life had always been her own, a series of choices she made to escape the life her family had planned for her. But now, standing before this man, everything she thought she knew seemed irrelevant. She felt something stir inside her, something she couldn't name, but it was there, a spark of something deeper than anger or fear. It was a pull, a bond she couldn't escape. Lily turned her gaze away, not ready to face the truth. She didn't know what this meant for her future, for the life she had once dreamed of. I don't want this, she whispered, more to herself than to him. I don't want any of this. The king's expression softened, and for the first time, she saw something close to empathy in his eyes. I never asked for it either, he said quietly. But we don't always get to choose, do we? She looked up at him then, her eyes searching his face for some kind of answer, some explanation for what had happened. But all she saw was the same sadness that had been there from the start. He was just as lost as she was. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely audible. Now, we figure it out. He replied simply, his voice steady. Together. Lily didn't know if she could ever accept this fate. But she knew, in that moment, that she had no choice. They were bound, and nothing would ever be the same again. The days following the revelation felt like a blur to Lily. She was living in a world that no longer made sense, caught between the life she had known and the future that was now thrust upon her. The Alpha King, Alexander Stone, was her mate, her fated bond, whether she wanted it or not. At first, she had fought it, her mind and heart rejecting the very idea. How could she possibly accept someone like him? Someone who had lied to her, who had kept his true identity hidden. But now, as the days passed, something in her was changing. She couldn't deny the connection she felt with him, the pull that seemed to draw her closer to him every time they were near. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something deep, something undeniable. Alexander had been patient with her, giving her space when she needed it, but also showing a side of himself that was softer, more vulnerable than she had ever imagined. It was as if he, too, was struggling with the weight of their bond. She watched him from across the room one evening as he sat by the fire, his expression distant, lost in thought. His silver eyes, so cold and commanding when they first met, were now filled with a sadness she couldn't quite understand. He had been a king, a ruler, for so long. But in that moment, he seemed like a man who had lost everything, someone who was just as broken as she was. Why didn't you tell me? She asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked up, his gaze meeting hers, and she saw the guilt flicker in his eyes. I wanted to protect you, he said softly. From what? Lily asked, stepping closer to him. From the truth, he replied. From the weight of this, of us. I thought you would hate me if you knew. Lily shook her head. I don't hate you, she said, though she wasn't sure if that was entirely true. I just don't understand. You don't have to, Alexander said, standing up and walking toward her. Not yet. I will give you time to understand, to accept this. But you must know one thing, Lily. This bond, this mate bond, is not something I forced on you. It is not something I can undo. It is a part of us now, for better or worse. He reached out, taking her hand gently in his. I don't expect you to love me right away. I don't even expect you to forgive me. But I will do everything in my power to show you that I'm not the monster you think I am. Lily felt a strange warmth spread through her at his words. She had expected him to be cold, distant, but instead, he was opening up to her, letting her see the man behind the king. She didn't know if she could ever love him the way he wanted, but she knew that this was the beginning of something. It was a chance, a second chance at something she had never thought she would have. She looked up at him, meeting his gaze with a quiet determination. I don't know if I can ever accept this, she said, her voice trembling. But I'll try. For both of us. Alexander smiled, a genuine smile that made his eyes soften. That's all I ask. The tension between them eased, just a little, and for the first time since their fated bond had been revealed, Lily felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for them to make this work. It wouldn't be easy, but then again, nothing worth having ever was. As the fire crackled in the background, Lily realized that her life would never be the same. But perhaps, for the first time, she was ready to face the future, whatever it might hold. She had no choice, after all. She was bound to him now, for better or worse. The days grew longer, and with each passing one, Lily found herself more and more tangled in the web of her fate. Alexander had kept his distance, respecting her need for space, but the bond between them continued to pull at her, a quiet force she couldn't ignore. She would wake up in the mornings, her heart heavy, her thoughts clouded with questions she couldn't answer. What was she supposed to feel? Was she supposed to love him? Was she supposed to be angry? She didn't know. What she did know was that every time she looked at him, something stirred inside her, a strange mixture of fear and curiosity. Alexander was everything she had never wanted. He was powerful, commanding, and distant. But as she watched him from across the room, the weight of the crown on his head seemed to lift for a moment, and she saw a glimpse of the man behind the king. A man who, like her, was lost in a world he never chose. One evening, as the sun began to set and the orange glow filled the sky, Alexander came to her. He wasn't dressed in his royal armor or his kingly attire. Instead, he wore simple clothes, his shirt rolled up at the sleeves, and for the first time, he looked human. The weight of his titles seemed to disappear, leaving just a man standing before her. Lily, he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of something unsaid. She didn't look at him right away. She had been avoiding him, her mind too full of confusion and fear to face him. But when she did turn to him, she saw something in his eyes, something raw, something real. I know you're struggling, he continued, and I don't expect you to have all the answers. I don't even have all the answers. But I want you to know that I'm here. I'm not just the Alpha King. I'm a man who is just as lost as you. His words hit her harder than she expected. She had always seen him as this immovable force, someone untouchable, but now he was standing before her, vulnerable in a way she had never imagined. For a moment, the tension in her chest eased. She took a step toward him, and without thinking, reached out to touch his arm. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, she said quietly, her voice shaking with the weight of her emotions. I don't know what's real anymore. Alexander took her hand, his grip gentle but firm. You don't have to know everything, he replied. Not yet. But what I do know is that we are in this together. Whether we like it or not, we're bound by something bigger than both of us. And we'll figure it out, one step at a time. Lily felt the warmth of his touch spread through her, and for the first time since this all began, she didn't feel quite so alone. The bond between them was still there, still pulling at her heart, but now, it felt less like a trap and more like something they could navigate together. I don't know if I can ever love you, Lily whispered, her heart heavy with the truth of her words. But I'm willing to try. For us. Alexander smiled, a soft, genuine smile that made something flutter in her chest. That's all I ask, he said. We don't have to rush. We'll take it one day at a time. And in that moment, Lily realized that maybe, just maybe, this bond wasn't a curse after all. It was a chance to learn, to grow, and to find something real, something worth fighting for. She wasn't ready to give her heart completely, but she was ready to try. Together, they would face whatever came next. And maybe, just maybe, they would find their way through the darkness. The nights in the castle grew colder, and Lily found herself growing accustomed to the quiet rhythm of her new life. Alexander had kept his promise to give her space, but as the days passed, their interactions became more frequent, more comfortable. There was a distance between them, one that was hard to bridge, but Lily couldn't help but notice the little changes. The way his gaze softened when he looked at her, the way he didn't flinch when she touched his arm, the way he was always near when she needed him most. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something real, something growing between them. One evening, as the moon rose high above the castle, Lily found herself standing by the window, looking out at the sprawling lands that stretched out before her. The night was clear, the sky dotted with stars, but Lily's mind was far from the beauty before her. It was filled with questions. Questions about her future, about the bond that had been forced upon her, about what it all meant. She had never imagined her life would take this turn. She had been prepared to marry someone she didn't love, to live a life of duty and expectation. But now, with Alexander standing by her side, her world had shifted in ways she couldn't yet fully understand. Lily, a familiar voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned to see Alexander standing in the doorway. His expression was soft, almost hesitant, as though he wasn't sure if he should interrupt her thoughts. "Are you all right?" he asked. She nodded, though she wasn't sure if she was entirely honest. "I'm fine. Just thinking," she replied. He took a step closer, his presence warm and comforting. "About what?" he asked, his voice gentle. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should share her thoughts with him. After all, they had only just begun to open up to each other, and the bond between them was still new, still fragile. But something in his eyes told her that he was willing to listen. "About us," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "About this bond. About what it means." Alexander's gaze softened, and he took another step forward, closing the distance between them. "It's not easy, I know," he said, his voice low and steady. "I never wanted to force you into this, but I also know that we can't change what's been set in motion." Lily sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Slightly. I know. But sometimes it feels like I don't even know who I am anymore. I was supposed to be someone else, live a different life. And now, here I am, bound to you, with a future I never imagined." Alexander reached out, gently cupping her chin, lifting her gaze to meet his. "You are still you, Lily," he said softly. "This bond doesn't change who you are. It just means we'll have to figure it out together. And I promise you, I will be with you every step of the way." She searched his eyes, seeing the sincerity in his words, and for the first time since this all began, she felt a flicker of hope. It was small, barely a spark, but it was there. Maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. "I don't know if I can ever love you the way you want," she said, the words coming out before she could stop them. "But I'm willing to try. I want to try." Alexander's expression softened even further, and he nodded. "That's all I ask," he said quietly. "One step at a time." The air between them shifted, and for a moment, there was no pressure, no weight of the bond between them. Just two people, standing in the quiet of the night, sharing a moment of understanding. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't love. But it was real, and it was something they could build upon. And for Lily, that was enough, for now. The days had begun to blur into one another as Lily adjusted to her new life. The weight of the bond still pressed heavily on her chest, but she could no longer deny that something between her and Alexander was changing. He had given her the space she needed, and in return, she had started to see him not just as the king, but as a man, someone who was just as lost as she was, someone who carried a burden far heavier than she had ever realized. They shared moments of quiet understanding, brief glances that spoke volumes, and unspoken promises that hung in the air like a delicate thread between them. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was a start. One evening, as the sun began to set and the castle was bathed in golden light, Lily found herself walking through the gardens, the soft rustling of the leaves calming her troubled mind. She had always found peace in nature, in the simplicity of the earth beneath her feet. It was one of the few things in her life that had never been complicated, never weighed down by expectation or duty. But now, everything felt different. Even the air seemed to hum with the tension between her and Alexander. As she wandered deeper into the gardens, she heard footsteps behind her, the soft crunch of gravel underfoot. She didn't need to turn around to know it was him. His presence had become as familiar to her as her own breath. "Lily," Alexander called softly, his voice carrying through the quiet evening. She turned, meeting his gaze as he approached, his face expressionless, but his eyes, they were different. There was something there now, something softer, more open. "Are you all right?" he asked, his tone gentle. Lily hesitated for a moment, the weight of her emotions pressing down on her, but she nodded. "I'm fine," she replied, though she wasn't sure if she believed it. Alexander stopped a few paces away from her, his posture relaxed, but there was a tension in the way he held himself. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said quietly. "I know you're still struggling. I can see it." Lily looked at him for a long moment, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm not pretending," she said softly. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. This bond, it's not something I asked for, Alexander. I never wanted this life." Alexander's expression softened, and for a moment, Lily could see the vulnerability in his eyes. "I know," he said, his voice low. "I didn't want this either. But I didn't have a choice." Lily's heart ached at his words, and for the first time, she saw the depth of the pain he carried. She had always viewed him as a powerful, almost untouchable figure, but now she saw him as a man who had been forced into a role he never asked for, a man who had been trapped in his own destiny, just as she had. "I never asked for this life either," he continued, his voice steady but filled with something raw. "But it's the life I have, and now it's the life we share." Lily looked away, her thoughts swirling. "I don't know if I can ever accept this," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. "I don't know if I can ever truly accept you." Alexander stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "You don't have to love me right away," he said softly. "I don't expect that. But I will prove to you, day by day, that I am not the man you fear. I will show you who I am, not as the king, but as the man who has been given a second chance." His words lingered in the air, and for the first time since the bond had been revealed, Lily felt a flicker of hope. It was small, barely a spark, but it was there. Maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. She wasn't ready to love him, not yet, but she was beginning to believe that it wasn't impossible. "I'll try," she said finally, her voice trembling. "I'll try to understand, to accept this bond." Alexander smiled, a soft, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "That's all I ask," he said, reaching out to take her hand. Lily hesitated for a moment, but then, without thinking, she allowed herself to reach for him. As their hands met, a warmth spread through her, a gentle reminder that, despite everything, they were in this together. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was real, and for the first time, that was enough. The days grew quieter after their conversation in the gardens, the tension between Lily and Alexander easing just a little with each passing day. The castle, once a place of uncertainty and fear, was starting to feel more like home, though a home that was still unfamiliar and full of unanswered questions. It had been a week since she had agreed to try, and while it wasn't easy, she found herself slowly coming to terms with her new reality. She wasn't in love with Alexander, not yet, but she could feel the weight of the bond between them growing stronger, the pull undeniable, even when she tried to resist it. They had spent more time together, small moments that meant more than either of them had expected. Breakfast in the mornings, walks through the gardens, shared looks across the dinner table. It wasn't much, but it was something. And for Lily, it was enough for now. One evening, as they sat in the grand dining room, the fire crackling in the hearth, Lily found herself watching Alexander closely. His usual stoic expression was softened by the warmth of the fire, his silver eyes reflecting the dancing flames. He had always been so distant, so caught up in his role as king, that she had never really seen him as a person, just a ruler, someone who could never be reached. But now, with the distance between them closing, she could see something else in him. A man, just like her, struggling to navigate the life fate had forced upon him. "You're quiet tonight," Alexander said, his voice breaking the silence between them. He was sitting across from her, his hands clasped together as he looked at her with those same unreadable eyes. "Just thinking," Lily replied, her voice soft. "About everything." She hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "About us." There it was, the thought she had been avoiding, the question that had been circling in her mind since their bond had been revealed. What was this? What were they, really? Alexander's gaze softened, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something deeper in his eyes. "I know this isn't easy," he said quietly, "and I know you're still figuring things out. But I want you to know something." Lily's heart raced, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension building inside her. "What?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't expect you to love me overnight," he continued, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. "I don't expect you to forget the life you had, or the future you thought you would have. But I do expect you to give us a chance. Not for me, but for you. For us." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything they had been through. Lily looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, she saw the man who had been hiding behind the crown. The man who was just as trapped by his circumstances as she had been. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. She wasn't sure what it was, but it was enough to make her nod. "I'll try," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I don't know if I can ever love you the way you want, but I'll try. I'll try to understand this, Bond. I'll try to understand you." Alexander's expression softened, a small but genuine smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "That's all I ask," he said, his voice low and sincere. "One day at a time." The air between them seemed to change in that moment, the weight of their unspoken words lifting just a little. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something. It was a beginning. They didn't have all the answers, and they didn't need to. They had time. Time to learn, time to grow, and maybe, just maybe, time to find something real between them. As the fire crackled and the night stretched on, Lily felt the bond between them solidifying, not with pressure or force, but with patience and understanding. She wasn't sure where this path would lead, but for the first time, she was willing to take the first step, and for her, that was enough. The days turned into weeks, and as time passed, Lily began to feel something stir within her that she hadn't expected. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was a quiet understanding, a connection between her and Alexander that was undeniable. They continued their routine, shared meals, walks through the gardens, quiet conversations by the fire. These moments, small as they were, began to add up. She no longer looked at him with distrust or fear. She saw him as a man who, just like her, had been thrust into a role he didn't ask for, a man who was doing his best to navigate a life he never imagined. One evening, as they walked through the castle gardens, the air crisp with the promise of winter, Lily turned to him. "I've been thinking," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of the unspoken words between them. "About the future. About us." Alexander looked at her, his expression unreadable, but his eyes held a quiet curiosity. "What about it?" he asked. She hesitated for a moment, her heart racing as she thought about the uncertainty that had once felt like a mountain in front of her. "I don't know what will happen. I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully accept this bond. But I think I can try. I think I can give us a chance." The words hung in the air between them, a small but powerful step forward. Alexander stopped walking and turned to face her, his gaze intense. "You don't have to make any promises you're not ready to keep," he said, his voice soft but firm. "This bond is ours, but I don't expect you to rush into anything. We'll take it one day at a time, as we've been doing." Lily nodded, her heart swelling with something she couldn't quite name. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was trust. Whatever it was, it made her feel lighter than she had in weeks. "I'm not sure where this is going," she said quietly, looking up at the stars above them. "But I want to be here, with you. I want to try, even if it's hard." Alexander reached out and gently cupped her cheek, his touch warm against the cool night air. "That's all I need, Lily. We don't need to have all the answers right now. We just need to keep moving forward." His words, simple as they were, settled deep within her, and for the first time since their bond had been revealed, Lily felt a sense of peace. The uncertainty, the fear that had plagued her for so long, began to fade, replaced by something new, a sense of possibility. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Lily and Alexander continued to grow closer. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of doubt, moments where the weight of their bond felt suffocating. But there were also moments of laughter, of shared smiles, of silent understanding. And in those moments, Lily realized that maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to care for him. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was something that felt real and steady, something that she could hold on to. One evening, as they sat together in the grand hall, Alexander turned to her, his expression serious but warm. "Lily," he said quietly, "I know we've been taking things slow, and I respect that. But I need you to know that, whatever happens, you are not alone in this. I am with you. We're in this together. His words, so simple yet so powerful, struck a chord deep within her. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, she saw not just the Alpha King, but the man who had stood by her side, who had been patient with her, who had never once forced her into anything. And in that moment, something shifted within her. She didn't know if she would ever love him the way he wanted, but she knew that, for the first time, she was ready to try. Together, they would face whatever came next, and maybe, just maybe, they would find a way to make this work. With each passing day, Lily found herself more at peace with the bond, more willing to trust in it. She still had doubts, still had fears, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone anymore. And that, in itself, was enough.